China this past week conducted a flight test of an anti-ship ballistic missile into the South China Sea, just as the Trump administration was unveiling new sanctions on Chinese officials over militarization in the disputed waterway. The test of two missiles, a DF-26 and a DF-21D road mobile missiles with enough precision to strike a ship at sea, landed in the sea near Hainan Island and the Paracels, according to Chinese press reports. Disclosure of the missile firing followed the earlier announcement by the State Department that the Commerce Department had imposed economic sanctions on 24 Chinese companies for their role in militarizing disputed islands in the South China Sea. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo also announced sanctions against Chinese executives of companies involved in building up the disputed islands and deploying military weapons and facilities on them. China has built up some 3,200 acres of disputed islands in the past 8 years, and in 2018 began deploying anti-ship and anti-aircraft missiles on some of the islands. The United States, China's neighbors, and the international community have rebuked China's sovereignty claims to the South China Sea and have condemned the building of artificial islands for the Chinese military, said Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross. The entities designated today have played a significant role in China's provocative construction of these artificial islands and must be held accountable. The South China Morning Post reported that the DF-26 was launched from Qinghai on Tuesday, citing a source close to the Chinese military. A U.S. official confirmed that missile test was carried out and said it was provocative but provided no details. Two U.S. aircraft carriers recently conducted exercises in the South China Sea, challenging China's claims to maritime sovereignty over some 90% of the sea. The Trump administration has been pushing back hard against Chinese claims to own the South China Sea through both diplomatic efforts, economic sanctions, and stepped-up military and naval operations. The missile firing took place after China's government protested the overflight of a U-2 reconnaissance aircraft that Beijing claimed violated a no-fly zone during naval exercises in the Bohai Sea in northern China. The DF-26 was launched from a missile base in Qinghai in northwestern China, and the DF-21D was fired from Zhejiang province in the eastern part of the country. Missiles are believed to be able to carry both nuclear and conventional warheads. The DF-26 has a range of around 2,485 miles, while the DF-21 has a range of around 1,116 miles. The South China Morning Post quoted the military source as saying the missile firings were intended to improve the People's Liberation Army's ability to deny access to the sea. This is China's response to the potential risks brought by the increasingly frequent incoming U.S. warplanes and military vessels in the South China Sea, the source told the newspaper. China doesn't want the neighboring countries to misunderstand Beijing's goals. While, with more tit-for-tat rhetoric and military posturing, China and the United States seem to be heading towards a showdown in the South China Sea. Upping the ante, on August 26, China fired vaunted aircraft carrier killer missiles into the sea, apparently as a response to the U.S. show of force there with aircraft carrier strike groups. This came after a U.S. U-2 spy plane flew over Chinese naval exercises in the Bohai Sea in violation of a no-fly zone. The U.S. followed up China's missile test by deploying a ballistic missile detection aircraft to spy on China's military drills. This all came in the midst of a sharp downward spiral in relations, and in the aftermath of U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's recent statement on U.S. policy in the South China Sea, which increased the possibility of a clash there. What might come next can be captured in 3 scenarios. In a good scenario, a united ASEAN or at least a majority of nations would take a stand against both countries' military posturing and buildup in the area. China and the US would pull in their horns and start to negotiate in earnest. To build confidence and trust, the US would refrain from the use of force, or the threat of it, and suspend its military buildup in the region, including its freedom of navigation operations challenging China's claims, and its intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance probes targeting China's defenses. China would, in turn, refrain from bullying its rival claimants and negotiate a modus operandi that includes sharing and cooperating on management of the resources of the South China Sea. China would also cease further construction and militarization on its claimed and occupied features, agree not to occupy and build on Scarborough Shoal, and not declare an air defense identification zone over disputed waters. China and the Association of Southeast Asian Nations would agree on and abide by a code of conduct that stabilizes the situation. China and the US would reinvigorate their military communication channels and reaffirm their commitment to the Code for Unplanned Encounters at Sea and negotiate an Incidents at Sea agreement. Given this foundation, the US and China would agree to peacefully coexist and share power in the region. A scenario at the opposite end of the spectrum, China would continue to bully its rival claimants. One or more would appeal to the US for backup. The US, with its credibility at stake, would respond with warships and warplanes. China would refuse to back down and a clash would ensue. While cooler heads would prevent things from spiraling out of control, the US-China relationship would plunge into a Cold War in which ASEAN members are increasingly pressured to choose sides. US-China incidents at and over the sea would become more frequent and insurance rates for shipping through the region would rise significantly. Foreign oil companies would suspend their operations, citing force majeure, and oil and gas exploration and exploitation beyond nearshore waters would all but cease. Clashes between foreign fishing fleets and national maritime enforcement agencies would become common. Negotiations for a code of conduct would collapse and the concept would be a lost cause. Worse, if some ASEAN members did choose sides, the grouping may split, and its role in international affairs in the region would become irrelevant. In short, the South China Sea would become a sea of anarchy where might makes right. The two powers would avoid a broad direct conflict only because China is not ready for war and the US is distracted by domestic issues. But as China's power grows and US domestic issues resolve themselves, a reckoning would be more likely. A more realistic scenario may be a continuation, an extension, of what we have now. In this scenario, the US and China would continue their military buildup and step up their diplomatic contest for the hearts and minds of ASEAN members. The Code of Conduct negotiations would drag on. ASEAN members would lean more heavily on the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea and the 2016 arbitration decision against China to increase pressure on it to abide by the ruling, largely to no avail. But they would also increase their opposition to outside military intervention in their disputes with China, again with limited success. The good scenario is a bridge too far. In their 2013 Sunnyland summit, China's President Xi Jinping proposed to then US President Barack Obama a new model of great power relations that implied equality and shared responsibility in world affairs. The US has essentially rejected it, apparently because it believes it is the world's only exceptional nation. Expecting that to change soon is unrealistic. The good news is that the ugly scenario is so disastrous that it is likely to be avoided by both sides. However, unexpected incidents and political developments could cause the situation to go from bad to ugly. What if a Chinese anti-air missile system locks onto a US spy plane, for example? Do US forces in the area, as the Washington Examiner writes, defend it by launching weapons against that Chinese system, or do they wait in the hope that China is bluffing? In the longer term, if the US wants to avoid direct conflict with China in the South China Sea, or at least postpone, it must accommodate, or at least appear to accommodate, to some degree China's international interests and aspirations. On what issues, when, how and how much are questions to ponder.